Wheels, rain, steel meeting bone. Skyle didn't see the Mercedes until it was already too late. 1 second she was carving through the wet streets, the neon glow of the city bleeding into puddles beneath her skates. The next, her body was airborne, a sickening crack, the
We need to
world
get you out of
spinning,
this rain.
then nothing but cold
Can you make it to the car?
pavement and the metallic taste of fear. The rain kept falling. She blinked up through the haze, her vision swimming, and saw him. A man in a suit too expensive for this part of town. Dark hair slicked back, rain running in rivulets down a face carved from stone and shadow. But it was the tattoo that froze her breath. Black ink crawling up his neck like smoke, disappearing into his collar, telling a story she couldn't read but somehow understood. Dangerous. He knelt beside her, his voice low and controlled, cutting through the chaos of screeching tires and distant sirens. Don't move. Not a suggestion. A command. Behind him, a driver scrambled out of the car, phone already in hand. Sir, I'll call. No. The tattooed man didn't even look back. His eyes stayed locked on Skyle, scanning her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve in the next 10 seconds. The hospital is closer. We take her ourselves. But the meeting, Mr. White, the board is waiting. Let them wait. Raina White lifted her from the pavement as if she weighed nothing, his grip firm but careful, and Skyle's world tilted again. Not from pain this time, but from the strange certainty that this collision wasn't random. That the rain, the skates, the Mercedes, all of it was leading somewhere she couldn't see yet. Somewhere that would change everything. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and desperation. Raina White stood in the corner of the trauma bay, rain still dripping from his tailored suit, watching doctors swarm around the girl he'd just pulled from the pavement. Her roller skate lay abandoned near the automatic doors. One was still spinning uselessly. Sir, you need to step out. A nurse tried to guide him toward the waiting room. I'm staying. 2 words. Final. His phone buzzed for the 7th time. The board. The merger. $15 million hanging in the balance. And he was standing in a hospital watching a stranger's chest rise and fall on a ventilator. Except she wasn't a stranger. Not entirely. Something about her face, the curve of her jaw, the pattern of freckles across her nose, felt like looking into a mirror that showed him someone he used to be. Someone before the tattoos, before the empire, before he learned that survival meant burying everything soft. She's stable, the doctor announced, peeling off bloodied gloves. Concussion, fractured wrist, contusions. Lucky. If you'd hesitated even 30 seconds. I didn't. Raina pulled out his wallet, extracted a black card. Whatever she needs. Private room. Best care. Bill everything to this account. And your name for the records? You don't need it. He left before anyone could ask more questions, stepping back into the rain that had started this whole collision. His driver waited by the Mercedes, dent still visible in the hood where Skyle's body had struck. The hospital? The driver asked. No. Raina stared at the building's glowing windows. The office. Tell the board I was unavoidably detained. But even as they pulled away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a choice that would cost him more than any business deal ever could. 3 days. Raina told himself he was just checking on a liability. Making sure the girl wouldn't sue, wouldn't talk, wouldn't become a problem that required the kind of solutions his old associates would suggest. But he'd been to the hospital 4 times, always in the small hours when the nurses changed shifts, and no one paid attention to the man in the expensive coat lurking near room 347. She was awake now. He could see her through the window, curly hair spread across the pillow, staring at the ceiling like she was trying to solve an equation written in the water stains. Her mother sat beside the bed, a black woman with worry carved into every line of her face, holding Skyle's uninjured hand like letting go might cause her to disappear. Raina's phone buzzed. His CFO. The merger fell through. Board wants answers. He typed back, let them want. Mr. White. He turned. The doctor from the trauma bay stood in the hallway, chart in hand, recognition dawning slowly across his features. You're still covering her bills, the doctor said. It wasn't a question. Is there a problem? No, most people who hit someone with their car don't. He trailed off, realizing what he'd just implied. Raina's expression didn't change. Is she going to be all right? Physically? Yes. Emotionally? The doctor glanced toward the window. She keeps asking why a stranger would pay for everything. Wants to thank you. Wants answers. She won't get them. Raina started walking toward the elevator. Why? The doctor's question stopped him. Why do this if you won't even let her know who saved her life? Because 18 years ago, Raina White died. The man who walked away from that identity didn't deserve gratitude. Didn't deserve anything except the empire he'd built on foundations of violence and secrecy. But he didn't say that. He just pressed the elevator button and waited for the doors to swallow him whole. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the city, Raina stood at the window and watched rain streak down the glass. Somewhere out there, Skyle was healing. Soon she'd leave the hospital, go back to her life, forget about the collision that had nearly killed her. And he would go back to being the ghost in the suit. The man whose tattoos told a story nobody living should know. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp features, dark eyes, and that black ink crawling up his neck like a map of all his sins. He should forget her. He wouldn't. Skyle was signing discharge papers when she saw him again. He stood near the hospital pharmacy, pretending to read a pamphlet about diabetes management, but his eyes kept flickering toward her. Same perfect suit. Same tattoo. Same controlled stillness that made everyone around him seem chaotic by comparison. She recognized him instantly. Not from the accident. Those memories were fragmented, dreamlike, but from 3 days of stolen glimpses. The man who always disappeared when nurses entered her room. The shadow who'd been haunting her recovery like he had unfinished business. Mom, I'll meet you at the car. Skyle handed over her bag of medications and crutches. Skyle, you shouldn't. 5 minutes. She crossed the lobby on unsteady legs, her fractured wrist in a cast covered with doodles from visitors who'd already moved on with their lives. He didn't run, just watched her approach with the patience of someone used to waiting out storms. You're the one who hit me, she said. Yes. And you've been paying for everything. Yes. Why? Raina folded the pamphlet, set it down with precision. Up close, she could see the details of his tattoo. Not random ink, but deliberate symbols, each one carrying weight she couldn't translate. Because I owed you that much, he said simply. You owe me a conversation. Skyle leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at her bones. And a ride home, since my bike is totaled and my roller skates are probably evidence in some insurance claim. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. Your mother. will understand that the man who almost killed me wants to make amends. She met his gaze without flinching. Or is there another reason you've been lurking around my hospital room like a guilty conscience? The silence stretched. Around them, the hospital continued its routine chaos. Codes overhead, gurneys rolling past, families navigating grief and relief in equal measure. My car is out front, Raina finally said. 30 minutes later, they sat in traffic, rain drumming on the Mercedes roof, and Skyle studied the man who derailed her life. He drove with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. Smooth lane changes, perfect following distance, hands at 10 and 2 like he was taking a driving test. The tattoo, she said. What does it mean? His jaw tightened. Nothing you need to worry about. Try again. It's a history. Old obligations. Debts paid in ink instead of blood. He glanced at her. Satisfied. Not even close. But Skyle let it drop, watching the city scroll past her window. Familiar streets, unfamiliar company. Why do I feel like I know you? Raina's hands tightened on the wheel. You don't, he said. But they both knew he was lying. The apartment building looked exactly how Raina remembered it. 12 stories of weathered brick, fire escape zigzagging up the eastern wall, same broken security door that never quite latched. He'd stood across the street once before, 18 years ago, watching windows glow with warmth he'd never be allowed to enter. You coming? Skyle was already out of the car, balancing on one crutch. Raina killed the engine. This was a mistake. He should drop her off, disappear back into the life he'd built from ashes and amnesia. But his feet carried him forward anyway, following her into the building's dim lobby where the elevator sign still read out of order in faded letters. 3rd floor, Skyle said, starting up the stairs. Hope you're in shape. He was. Years of violence had demanded it. But climbing these particular stairs felt like ascending toward a reckoning he'd been avoiding since the moment metal met bone. The apartment door was green. Peeling paint. Number 3C in tarnished brass. Skyle's key turned in the lock, and Raina's entire world tilted sideways. Because standing in the kitchen, frozen mid-motion with a coffee pot in her hands, was Sora Yamato. Older, grayer, but unmistakably the woman he'd loved enough to die for. The woman he'd left behind to keep her safe. The coffee pot shattered on the linoleum. No. Sora's voice came out broken, disbelieving. No, you're dead. I saw. Mom. Skyle looked between them, confusion sharpening into something else. Something that felt like the ground opening up beneath them all. Raina couldn't move. Couldn't speak. The tattoos on his neck suddenly felt like they were burning. Each symbol a reminder of the man he'd become to survive the death of the man he used to be. Raina. Sora said his name like a prayer and an accusation. Tears streaked down her face. They told me you were dead. The body, the funeral, her eyes dropped to Skyle. Back to Raina. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. Skyle was 18. Dark curls inherited from her mother. But the shape of her face, the intensity of her eyes, the way she stood even when wounded. Oh my God, Skyle whispered. Oh my God, I'm your father. Raina's voice came out steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. And I've been dead for 18 years because staying alive would have killed you both. The silence that followed could have swallowed cities. Sora sank into a chair, hand pressed to her mouth. Skyle just stared, the crutch clattering to the floor as her legs forgot how to hold her weight. And Raina stood in the doorway of an apartment that smelled like the home he'd never allowed himself, watching two people he'd loved from a distance finally understand the shape of his absence. "Get out," Sora finally said, her voice raw. "Get out of my house. I'll explain. Get out." Raina left. Because that's what ghosts did. They haunted. They didn't stay for breakfast or explanations or the messy work of resurrection. But as he descended those 3 flights of stairs, he knew with absolute certainty that this collision was far from over. Behind him, he could hear Skyle crying and Sora's voice trying to soothe her, both of them trying to process the impossible truth that had just walked back into their lives wearing a dead man's face. The bridge was neutral ground. No apartment memories. No hospital antiseptic. Just steel and water and the kind of darkness that made telling the truth easier. Skyle found him there at 2 a.m., exactly where his text message had said he'd be. She moved better now, for days post-hospital, but the crutch was still necessary, and the cast on her wrist glowed white in the streetlight. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said, joining him at the railing. "She wouldn't approve. She hasn't approved of anything in 18 years. Skyle stared out at the river. "She told me you were a good man who died in a warehouse fire. That you worked security. That you loved us, but the world was dangerous. All true, except the dying part." Raina's fingers traced the edge of his tattoo, a habit born from years of remembering. The fire was real. The body they found was real. I just made sure it wasn't mine. Why? Because the people I worked for didn't accept resignations. Because I'd seen things, done things, knew things that made me a liability the moment I wanted out. He finally looked at her. "Your mother was 3 months pregnant. I had 2 choices. Stay and watch you both become leverage, or disappear completely. So you chose us." Skyle's voice cracked. "By leaving us." "Yes." The river rushed below them, indifferent to human tragedy. "The tattoos," Raina continued, pulling down his collar to reveal more of the ink. "They're a ledger. Each symbol represents a debt paid, a deal made, a life I took or saved. This one," he touched a spiral near his collarbone, "that's the fire. The death I bought with someone else's corpse. This one," a sharp line behind his ear, "the first business I built legitimately. And this," he indicated a small, barely visible mark on his pulse point, "that's the day you were born. The day I watched from across the street and knew I'd made the right choice." Skyle was crying now, silent tears that caught the light. "I've been watching you for 18 years, Raina admitted. "Every birthday. Every skating competition. The day you graduated high school. I knew your favorite color, your best friend's name, the college you got accepted to. I knew everything except how to stop being dead. Until I rolled in front of your car. Until that." He smiled, bitter and broken. "Fate or irony. I haven't decided which. Mom said you were good. Was she right?" Raina considered the question. Considered the empire he'd built, the legitimate businesses that barely covered the criminal foundations, the men who still called him for favors he couldn't quite refuse. "I was trying to be," he said finally. "But good men don't fake their deaths. Good men don't build empires on blood money and call it redemption." Skyle reached out, her uncasted hand finding his. The touch was electric, impossible, the first physical connection between father and daughter in 18 years. "Good men protect their families," she said quietly, "even when it costs them everything. They stood there until dawn started bleeding across the horizon, two strangers learning to be something more, bridging 18 years of absence with the fragile architecture of truth. The emergency board meeting happened in Raina's penthouse instead of the usual conference room. He wanted home field advantage for what came next. 7 men sat around his dining table, each one representing a different piece of the empire he'd built. Some legitimate, some decidedly less so, and all of them confused about why he'd called this meeting at midnight. "Gentlemen," Raina began, standing at the head of the table, "I'm shutting it down." Silence. Then chaos. "You can't just. The contracts alone. We have obligations." "Shut. It. Down." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Every operation that isn't completely legal. Every deal that requires silence or leverage, or the kind of phone calls we don't record. Done. Finished. I'm pulling out." Vincent Kong, his oldest associate, leaned back with dangerous calm. "Why the sudden conscience, Raina? You've been playing this game for 20 years. 18, Raina corrected. "And my reasons are my own." "Is this about the girl?" Another executive, Dmitry Volkov, smirked. "The one you hit with your car. Word travels. People talk. You've been distracted, sloppy. Choose your next words carefully." But Dmitry wasn't stupid enough to heed warnings. "We looked into her. Skyle Yamato. Interesting last name. Even more interesting that she looks just like you around the—" Raina had him against the wall before the sentence finished, forearm pressed to his throat, the full weight of 18 years of controlled violence finally finding a target. "You don't look at her. You don't mention her. You don't even think about her unless you want to discover exactly what these tattoos actually mean." He released Dmitry, who stumbled back gasping. Vincent stood slowly. "We need 3 months to unwind properly. Anything faster raises flags, attracts attention. The kind that gets people arrested or worse. You have 6 weeks. That's not enough. Then work faster." Raina straightened his suit. "I've spent 18 years building something that could withstand scrutiny. Now I'm cashing out. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now and try their luck explaining to federal prosecutors why their books don't quite add up without my cover." Nobody moved. "Good. We're done here." They filed out in silence, but Raina caught Vincent's arm at the door. "She's your daughter," Vincent said quietly. "Isn't she?" "Yes." "Then you know they'll use her. The people we've wronged, the competitors we've crushed, the debts we've called in, they'll see her as payback." "I know. Can you protect her and destroy the empire simultaneously?" Raina thought about Skyle on that bridge, hand in his, choosing to believe in a father she'd never known. "I have to." Vincent nodded, something like respect crossing his features. "Then I'll make sure the shutdown happens clean." "But Raina, the old guard won't go quietly. Some debts can't be paid off. They can only be collected." After everyone left, Raina stood at his window watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Skyle was sleeping in that third-floor apartment, unaware that her father had just declared war on his own empire to keep her safe. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was simple. "Interesting choice. Let's see how it plays out." He deleted it, but the threat lingered like smoke. Skyle's phone lit up at 3 a.m. with a message from a blocked number. "Tell your father to stop, or we'll remind him what he owes." Attached was a photo. Grainy, dark, but unmistakable. Skyle leaving her morning class, coffee in hand, completely unaware of the camera documenting her routine. She sat up in bed, heart hammering. Across the room, her mother slept peacefully, finally at rest after weeks of emotional upheaval. Skyle couldn't wake her, couldn't drag her back into the nightmare that Raina's resurrection had triggered. She texted the only person who would understand. "They sent me something. I need to see you." Raina's reply came instantly. "Address?" 20 minutes later, she met him in the 24-hour diner 3 blocks from her apartment. He looked like he hadn't slept, still wearing yesterday's suit, tattoo visible where he'd loosened his collar. She slid her phone across the table. His expression didn't change as he read the message, studied the photo. But his hands tightened around the device until she worried the screen might crack. "How many people knew?" Skyle asked. "That you were shutting things down." 7. All trusted associates. All with more to lose than gain from betraying me. He handed back her phone. "This isn't them. This is someone from the old world. Before I died. Before I built the legitimate empire. Someone you owe. Everyone owes someone in that life. The question is who decided now was the time to collect." Skyle watched him think, saw the calculations happening behind dark eyes that looked so much like her own. "What do we do?" "We." He looked up sharply. "You do nothing. You go back to school, back to your life, and let me handle. They sent the photo to me, not you. That makes this my problem too. Skyle, I'm not a child, and I'm not delicate. You've been watching me for 18 years, right? So you know I don't break easy." She leaned forward. "Whatever this is, whoever wants to hurt you through me, I deserve to understand the battlefield." Raina studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he pulled out a pen and started writing on a napkin. "Names, dates, connections. These are the people who knew the old me. The ones who might remember what Raina Yamato looked like before he became Raina White." He tapped one name. Jeremiah Cross. Mid-50s. Runs a private equity firm that's actually a front for money laundering. "We had a deal 18 years ago. I'd provide cover for his operations in exchange for startup capital. Let me guess. You never finished paying him back because you died." "Exactly. And now he's decided my existence means you've been alive all along, which means he's owed 18 years of interest." Skyle felt the pieces clicking together. What does he want? Probably for me to resume our arrangement. Legitimize his money, provide legal cover, go back to being the criminal accountant who made his empire possible. "And if you refuse?" Raina's silence was answer enough. Skyle's phone buzzed again. Same blocked number. "You have 48 hours to convince him. After that, we get creative." She showed him the message. He crumpled the napkin, jaw tight with controlled fury. "I'll handle Cross," he said. "How?" "The way I handle everyone who makes the mistake of threatening what's mine." He stood, dropping cash on the table. "By reminding him why I survived 18 years in a world designed to kill people like me." But as they walked out into the pre-dawn darkness, Skyle couldn't shake the feeling that this threat was bigger than one angry creditor. That something older and uglier was waking up, drawn by the scent of resurrection and unfinished business. And in 48 hours, they'd discover exactly what happened when the past refused to stay buried. The office building belonged to Cross Holdings, a gleaming tower of steel and money that stretched 40 stories into the Seattle skyline. Skyle insisted on coming despite Raina's protests. And now they sat in the reception area waiting for an audience with the man who'd decided she was leverage. "You don't have to do this," Raina said quietly. "Yes, I do." Skyle adjusted her blazer, borrowed from her mother, slightly too big, but professional enough. "He brought me into this. I'm going to look him in the eye when you tell him no." The elevator doors opened. A woman in her 30s, sharp suit and sharper smile, gestured them inside. "Mr. Cross is ready." The executive suite occupied the entire 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city that Raina had once helped Cross dominate from the shadows. And standing at that window, hands clasped behind his back, was Jeremiah Cross himself. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the violence in his posture. "Raina Yamato." Cross turned, and his smile was all teeth. "Or should I call you Raina White now?" I have to admit, the resurrection was impressive. The new identity, the legitimate businesses, the complete erasure of your former life. Very thorough. Almost perfect. "Almost," Raina agreed. "Except you couldn't quite let go of everything." Cross's eyes shifted to Skyle. "The girl. Your daughter. The one loose thread that unravels the whole tapestry. Leave her out of this. But she's the entire point." Cross moved to his desk, pulling out a folder thick with documents. 18 years ago, we had an agreement. You'd provide financial cover for my operations. Launder money, create shell corporations, make my dirty cash look clean. And in exchange, I'd fund your little escape plan. I paid you back. Every dollar. In the first 2 years. Then you died. Conveniently. Cross spread the papers across his desk. "But death doesn't erase debt, Raina. It just accrues interest. By my calculations, you owe me approximately $47 million. Plus services rendered." Skyle felt the number like a physical blow. 47 million. "I don't have that kind of cash," Raina said flatly. "No, but you have something better. Access. Reputation. A network of legitimate businesses that could absorb my operations seamlessly." Cross leaned forward. "Come back to work, Raina. Resume our arrangement. Help me like you used to, and we'll call the debt settled." "No. Then I'll take payment another way." Cross's eyes settled on Skyle. "That apartment building your daughter lives in? I own it. The scholarship funding her college? My foundation. The hospital that treated her after the accident? I sit on their board. I've been circling you both for years, Raina, waiting for you to surface. Now that you have, I can tighten the noose whenever I want." Skyle stood. She hadn't planned to speak, but fury pushed words out before caution could stop them. "You think we're scared of you?" Her voice cut through the room. "You think my father stayed dead for 18 years just to cave to threats from a wannabe kingpin who needs someone else to cook his books?" "Skyle," Raina warned. But she was done being quiet. "He built an empire without you. He raised me from a distance without anyone knowing. He survived 18 years in hiding, and you think a few threats will bring him back." She stepped closer to Cross's desk. "You're not powerful. You're desperate. Because the world moved on without you, and now you're trying to claw back relevance by threatening a girl you don't know and a man you never understood." Cross's expression hardened. "Brave words. Let's see if you feel the same when." "When what?" "When you try to evict my mother. Go ahead. We'll find another place. When you pull my scholarship, I'll work 3 jobs. You think growing up without a father taught me to be soft?" Skyle's laugh was sharp, bitter. You have no idea what we've survived. And you definitely don't know what my father is capable of now that he has something worth fighting for." The silence that followed vibrated with tension. Then Cross smiled. "I like her. She has your fire, Raina. Shame she'll have to learn what happens when you burn the wrong bridges." "Touch her," Raina said quietly, "and I'll dismantle everything you've built. Every shell corporation, every hidden account, every piece of leverage you think you have, I'll expose it all. Because I'm the one who created most of it, Jeremiah. And I can destroy it just as easily." They stared at each other, two men who'd built empires on secrets, now facing off across a daughter neither had expected to be the breaking point. "You have 24 hours to reconsider," Cross finally said. "After that, I start collecting. And trust me, I always collect." Raina took Skyle's arm, guiding her toward the elevator. They didn't speak until they were back on the street, rain starting to fall in that perpetual Seattle drizzle. "That was stupid," Raina said. "That was necessary." Skyle's hands were shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system. "He needed to know I'm not some pawn he can move around." "You're not. You're my daughter, which makes you the most valuable piece on the board." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Cross won't stop. He'll escalate. And I can't protect you and dismantle the empire simultaneously. So don't dismantle it." Skyle met his eyes. "Use it. You built something legitimate. Something real. Use that power to crush him the legal way. That takes time. Then we buy time. We play his game until we can flip the board." She smiled, fierce and determined. "You taught me how to survive by watching from a distance. Now teach me how to fight up close." Raina looked at his daughter, 18 years old, brave beyond reason, standing in the rain like she owned the whole damn city, and saw himself reflected back. Not the man who'd died in that warehouse fire. The man who'd survived long enough to see what he'd created. "All right," he said, "but we do this smart. No more confrontations until we have leverage." "Agreed." They started walking, father and daughter, plotting strategy against a man who'd miscalculated what resurrection really meant. Behind them, 40 stories up, Jeremiah Cross watched them disappear into the city and made a phone call to people who specialized in collecting debts the hard way. Sora hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. Just sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around cold coffee, staring at the photographs spread in front of her like evidence of a crime she'd witnessed but never reported. "Mom," Skyle prompted gently, "what did you see?" It was 3 days after the fire. Sora's voice came out hollow. "The one that supposedly killed your father. I went to the warehouse. I needed to see it, needed to understand how I'd lost him. And that's when I saw them." "Saw who?" "2 men carrying a body bag out of the ruins. I was across the street, hiding behind my car because I didn't want to be seen. They loaded it into a van and drove away. But before they did..." She looked up at Skyle, eyes haunted. One of them looked exactly like Jeremiah Cross. Younger, but the same face. Same walk. Same way of moving like the world owed him space. Raina, who'd been standing by the window, turned sharply. "You saw Cross at the warehouse. I thought he was there to pay respects or handle business. Your death was news in certain circles. Everyone knew someone important had died." Sora's hands trembled. "But now I realize, if you weren't in that body bag, who was?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Skyle looked at her father. "You said you bought your death with someone else's corpse. Whose?" Raina's jaw tightened. A man named Thomas Reeves. Low-level enforcer who'd made the mistake of skimming from Cross's operations. They were going to kill him anyway. I just accelerated the timeline. Made it look like we both died in the fire. Jesus, Raina. Sora stood abruptly, chair scraping. You partnered with Cross to kill someone? I partnered with necessity to survive. His voice was cold, factual. Reeves was dead the moment he stole from Cross. I gave his death purpose. Gave us a chance. And now Cross is using that same death to blackmail you, Skyle said, pieces clicking together. He has proof you were involved. Proof that could destroy everything you've built. Not just that. Sora pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she scrolled through old photos. After I saw them take the body, I started documenting everything. Every time I saw Cross or his associates. Every suspicious meeting. I thought I was going crazy, thought I was seeing conspiracies everywhere because I couldn't accept that Raina was really dead. She turned the phone around. Hundreds of photos. Time-stamped. Dated. A whole archive of Cross's criminal activities captured by a grieving woman who'd accidentally become the perfect witness. You've been building a case against him for 18 years, Raina said slowly. I've been building insurance. Something to protect Skyle if the men who killed you ever came back. Sora met his eyes. Turns out I was protecting her from you. The accusation landed like a punch. Mom, Skyle started. No, she's right. Raina moved to the table, studying the photos with professional assessment. I brought this to your door. I stayed dead to keep you safe, then came back to life and dragged you into the exact danger I was avoiding. So fix it. Sora's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. You want to protect your daughter? Use this. Every photo I took, every detail I documented, it's leverage. Proof that Cross has been operating outside the law for nearly 2 decades. Skyle looked at the evidence, then at her parents. 2 people who'd loved each other enough to survive 18 years of separation, now reunited by violence and necessity. Can we take him down with this? She asked. Raina picked up a photo dated 2 months ago. Cross meeting with a known arms dealer outside a restaurant Raina recognized. Legally? Yes. But it takes time. Investigations, warrants, building a prosecutable case. We don't have that kind of time. Then we force his hand. Skyle started gathering the photos. We make him come at us publicly in a way that exposes him. He wants you back in his organization? Fine. You set up a meeting where a wire, get him to confess everything on tape. That's insane, Sora said. That's agentic, Skyle corrected. Cross thinks he has all the leverage. The debt, the threats, the secrets. But he doesn't know about Mom's evidence. He doesn't know we have 18 years of his crimes documented. Raina started to smile, a dangerous expression that reminded Skyle exactly whose daughter she was. We feed him what he wants to hear, he said, picking up the thread. I tell him I'm reconsidering his offer. Set up a meeting to discuss terms. Meanwhile, we tip off the FBI about unusual financial activities at Cross Holdings. And when they investigate, Skyle continued, they find Mom's evidence conveniently leaked to the right prosecutor. Plus whatever confessions you get on tape. He'll know it's a trap, Sora warned. Maybe. But he's arrogant. He spent 18 years believing he won, that he drove Raina into hiding and came out on top. That arrogance makes people sloppy. They looked at each other, 3 people bound by blood and trauma, now united by strategy. This could go wrong in 100 different ways, Raina said. Then we plan for 101. Skyle pulled out her laptop. We have 24 hours before Cross escalates. Let's make them count. As they started planning, mapping out every angle and contingency, none of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the camera lens focused on their kitchen window, or the message being typed to Jeremiah Cross. They're plotting something. Want me to intervene? The response came quickly, no. Let them plan. It's more fun to watch hope die slowly. The FBI raid happened at dawn. 40 agents descended on Cross holdings simultaneously with warrants for financial records, communications, and executive testimony. Jeremiah Cross was escorted from his penthouse in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting his arrest to a city that had spent years ignoring his crimes. Skyle watched it on the news from her new office, 32nd floor, legitimate business park, her name on the door in clean, professional letters, Raina White CEO. The transition had taken 4 weeks. 4 weeks of legal maneuvering, asset transfers, and careful restructuring that transformed Raina's empire into something clean. The criminal elements had been excised like tumors, sold off, or shut down entirely. What remained was a network of profitable legal businesses that Skyle now controlled. Her father had signed everything over to her 3 days ago. "You're better at this than I ever was," he'd said, watching her review quarterly reports with the kind of focused intensity he recognized from his own reflection. "Build something I couldn't. Something that doesn't require tattoos or secrets or bodies in warehouse fires." Now he was gone. Not dead this time, just departed. A quiet life in Spain, using the name Raina Yamato again, finally allowed to rest after 18 years of running. Skyle's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Proud of you, kid. Remember, the best revenge is building something they can't destroy." She smiled, recognizing her father's voice even through digital anonymity. A knock on her door. Vincent Kong entered, carrying files from the legal department. He'd been one of the 7 executives at that midnight meeting, one of the few who'd chosen to stay clean when Raina offered the choice. "Cross is cooperating," Vincent reported. "Giving up associates, cutting deals. The prosecutors say he'll likely spend the next 20 years in federal prison." "Good." Skyle signed off on the reports. "And the shareholders?" "Impressed. You've increased profitability by 18% in 4 weeks while eliminating all the risk factors. They're calling you a prodigy. They're calling me my father's daughter. They just don't know how literally." Vincent smiled. "He taught you well, even from a distance." After he left, Skyle stood at her window, same view Raina used to have from his penthouse, but earned through different means. She'd taken the empire he'd built on violence and reshaped it into something that could withstand sunlight. Her mother had returned to teaching, finally able to sleep without nightmares of warehouse fires and body bags. They had dinner every Sunday, talking about normal things, work, friends, the small victories that made up a life no longer defined by absence. Her phone buzzed again. This time a photo, Raina on a beach somewhere, tattoos visible beneath a casual shirt, looking more relaxed than Skyle had ever seen him. The caption read simply, "Found peace. You should too." She texted back, "Working on it. 1 quarterly report at a time." Because that's what victory looked like in the end. Not dramatic confrontations or perfect endings. Just the daily work of building something better than what came before. Skyle turned back to her desk, where a framed photo sat beside her computer. Her mother and father, taken 20 years ago before the warehouse fire, before the death and resurrection, before everything broke and healed and broke again. They looked young, in love, unaware of the future that would separate them. But they'd survived, all three of them, and now finally they were free. As evening settled over the city, Skyle pulled up the quarterly projections, diving into work with the same intensity that had carried her through roller skating and hospital recoveries and midnight meetings with men who trafficked in violence. She was Raina White's daughter. She was Sora Yamato's daughter. She was her own person, building her own empire, one clean deal at a time. And somewhere in Spain, a man with tattoos that told a story of death and resurrection finally allowed himself to rest, knowing that the best thing he'd ever created wasn't an empire. It was a daughter who could run one better. 3 years later, the empire Skyle built had expanded into markets her father never dreamed of touching: clean energy, tech startups, affordable housing developments that actually served communities instead of displacing them. The White name meant something different now. Something earned, not inherited through violence. She still kept that framed photo on her desk. Her parents, young and unbroken, frozen in a moment before the world taught them that love sometimes meant letting go. But there was a new photo beside it now. Thanksgiving dinner, 6 months ago. Sora at the head of the table, laughing at something off camera. And Raina, grayer, softer around the edges, tattoos finally just ink instead of a ledger, visiting from Spain for the first time since his departure. His hand rested on Skyle's shoulder, a touch that carried 18 years of distance finally closed. They weren't a conventional family. Probably never would be. But they were theirs, built from ashes and accidents, held together by the kind of resilience that only comes from surviving the impossible. Skyle's assistant knocked, reminding her of the evening gala. Another award, another speech, another room full of people who saw a young CEO and never imagined the collision that started it all. She grabbed her coat, glancing one last time at those photos. A dead man who learned to live. A grieving woman who learned to document. A daughter who learned that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or power. It's the chance to rewrite your family's ending. She stepped into the elevator, her reflection sharp in the polished doors. No tattoos mapping her sins. No secrets burning beneath her skin. Just a woman who'd turned a rainy night collision into a legacy worth building. The doors closed. And somewhere in Spain, Raina's phone buzzed with a text, another award. They're calling me a visionary. Think they'd say the same if they knew about the roller skates? His response came quickly. They'd say you're your father's daughter. And they'd finally be right. Skyle smiled, pocketing her phone as the elevator descended toward a future she'd fought to create. One where empires were built with integrity, where fathers came back from the dead, and where a girl on roller skates could collide with destiny and come out standing. Thank you for following Skyle and Raina's journey. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of redemption, resilience, and the families we choose to build. Comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello and know how far this story has traveled. Until the next collision, keep rolling forward. Black Heart.